Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Connor Walsh, and this was the 6th hour searching for Sarah Williams on the trails of Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. The October air bit through my ranger uniform like teeth, and my legs felt like concrete pillars beneath me. 6 fucking hours of calling her name into a forest that swallowed sound like a hungry mouth. Sarah Williams. My voice cracked on the second call. The metallic taste of exhaustion coated my tongue, mixing with the bitter remnants of truck stop coffee I downed at 4 a.m. My radio crackled with static. Unit 23 checking coordinates. Unit 47 reporting negative contact from the North Ridge. Nothing. Always nothing. GPS showed 35 degree 37, 12.8, and 83 degree 25 on 45.2. WO. Deep in the Cataract Falls Trail system, where Sarah's hiking group last saw her yesterday evening. 22 years old, brown hair, 5'4", wearing a red North Face jacket that should have made her visible from space. Should have. But the forest had different ideas. My boots, standard issue Danner Rangers, had worn a blister on my left heel that sent shooting pain up my calf with each step. The pack on my shoulders, 43 pounds of search and rescue gear, felt like it was crushing my spine vertebra by vertebra. But Sarah's mother's voice from this morning's briefing kept echoing in my skull. Please find my baby. She's all I have left. 3 months. That's how long I'd been stationed here, transferred from Yellowstone, where the biggest supernatural worry was tourists feeding bears. Nobody warned me about the local legends. Nobody mentioned the stories the old-timers whispered about beautiful women who appeared on mountain trails, lost and helpless, drawing good Samaritans into the deep woods where screams echoed for days. The trail curved ahead, disappearing into a grove of ancient oaks whose branches formed a canopy so thick that afternoon felt like dusk. My maglite beam cut through shadows that seemed to move just beyond its reach. Temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour, unusual for October even at this elevation. Unit 15 to base, I spoke into my radio. Static answered. I tried again. Unit 15 to base, requesting status update on victim Sarah Williams. Over. More static. Then a voice that made my blood freeze. Connor. Soft. Female. Coming from somewhere ahead on the trail. I drew my sidearm, a Glock 22 that felt reassuring despite whatever the hell was happening out here. Sarah? Sarah Williams? This is Park Ranger Connor Walsh. Silence. Then faintly, help me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved toward the voice. Every fiber of training told me to call for backup, but my radio was dead static and my cell phone showed no bars. Hadn't since hour 3 of this search. The voice came again, weaker now, from somewhere in the oak grove ahead. Please, I'm hurt. I broke into a run, crashing through underbrush that tore at my uniform pants. Thorns raked across my hands, drawing blood that I barely felt. The voice was definitely female, definitely in distress. Had to be Sarah. Had to be. The grove opened into a small clearing where moonlight, when the hell had it gotten dark, filtered through the canopy. And there she was. A young woman sat against the base of a massive oak, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Long brown hair fell across her face, and she wore a red jacket that matched Sarah's description perfectly. But something was wrong. The smell hit me first. Not the pine and earth scent of the forest, but something else. Something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a grave. Oh, thank God, she whispered, looking up at me with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. I've been waiting so long. I approached cautiously, keeping my weapon lowered but ready. Standard protocol for injured hikers, but my gut screamed warnings. Are you Sarah Williams? Ma'am, I'm Park Ranger Connor Walsh. We've been searching for you. She smiled, and something in that expression made my skin crawl. Too wide, too knowing. "I've been waiting for you, Connor." How did she know my name? I'd never introduced myself to her hiking group. My nameplate was partially obscured by my jacket zipper, but wounded people could be confused, disoriented. I knelt beside her, pulling out my first aid kit. "Where does it hurt? How long have you been here?" Her hand touched my wrist, and her skin was ice cold despite the relatively warm evening. "It hurts everywhere," she whispered. "But you can make it better." The touch sent electricity up my arm, not unpleasant, almost arousing, which made my stomach turn. This was a victim, a wounded hiker who needed medical attention, but her fingers traced patterns on my skin that made my vision blur and my thoughts feel thick and syrupy. "I need to check your injuries," I managed, but my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. She leaned closer, and I caught sight of something that made my blood turn to ice water. Her jacket was red, yes, but not North Face red. It was red with something else, something dark and wet that gleamed in the moonlight. Blood. Fresh blood that wasn't hers. I jerked backward, raising my weapon. "Stay back. Keep your hands where I can see them." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass mixed with wind chimes. As she rose to her feet, her broken leg straightened with wet, crunching sounds, bones resetting, flesh knitting itself back together. "You're not from here," she said conversationally, brushing dirt off her blood-soaked jacket. "You don't know the stories, do you, Connor? About the witch who's hunted these trails for 300 years? My finger found the trigger. Training kicked in over terror. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but..." "Game?" Her voice changed, becoming older, raspier, though her face remained young and beautiful. "This is no game, Ranger. I've been wearing Sarah's skin for 16 hours now. Do you know how long it takes a human soul to completely dissolve? About 18 hours in my experience. If this story's giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Connor's situation? Comment below." The thing that had been Sarah Williams began to change. Her skin rippled like water, revealing something underneath that made my sanity try to flee my skull. Her beautiful face stretched and elongated, jaw unhinging like a snake's. Her fingers extended into claws that dripped with blackness that wasn't quite blood. I fired 3 rounds center mass. The bullets passed through her like she was made of smoke, embedding themselves in the oak behind her with sharp cracks that echoed through the clearing. "Iron bullets might work," she hissed, her voice now a chorus of different tones. Young women's voices layered over something ancient and hungry. "But you don't have iron bullets, do you, Connor? You have standard issue hollow points that can't touch something that exists between flesh and spirit." She was right. My ammunition was standard Park Service issue. But I kept firing anyway, emptying my clip in desperation as she flowed toward me like liquid nightmare. The last thing I remembered clearly was her claws raking across my chest, tearing through Kevlar vest and uniform shirt like tissue paper. Pain exploded through my ribcage, and I felt my own blood, hot and sticky, soaking my undershirt. When I came to, gray dawn light filtered through the canopy. My radio crackled with search teams calling my designation. My chest burned like hell, but when I looked down, my uniform was intact. No tears, no blood. The clearing looked different too. Smaller, more ordinary. Just another patch of forest. But Sarah Williams was there. The real Sarah Williams, unconscious but breathing, wearing a red North Face jacket that was definitely not soaked in blood. Her leg was broken. Actually broken this time. And she had hypothermia symptoms, but she was alive. "Unit 15 to base," I radioed, my voice shaking. "I have the victim. Coordinates 35 degree 37 12.8 N 83 degree 25 and 45.2. W request immediate medical evac. Victim is alive but injured, possible hypothermia and broken leg." As the rescue helicopter lifted Sarah to safety 3 hours later, I stood in that clearing trying to make sense of what had happened. Hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress? Some kind of psychological break? But deep in my jacket pocket, I found something that made my blood run cold. A lock of hair. long, brown, and still damp with something that smelled like flowers and graves. That night, back at the ranger station, I researched local legends on the station's ancient computer. What I found in newspaper archives dating back to the 1800s made me request an immediate transfer. The seduction witch of Great Smoky Mountains. Dozens of disappearances over the centuries. Men found days later, either dead from apparent heart attacks or babbling about beautiful women who led them into the forest. A few women survivors who claimed they'd seen the witch wearing the faces of missing hikers. But here's what really fucked with my head. Every single account mentioned the same thing. The witch needed 18 hours to completely consume a human soul and permanently wear their skin. I'd found Sarah Williams after 16 hours. 2 hours. I'd saved her by 2 fucking hours. That transfer came through the next week. I'm stationed in Nevada now, where the biggest supernatural worry is supposed to be UFOs and desert mirages. But sometimes when the wind blows just right across the desert, I smell flowers and graves. And sometimes late at night I wonder about the next ranger who gets stationed in Great Smoky Mountains. The one who doesn't know the local legends. The one who might not find the next victim in time. Sarah Williams recovered fully. She has no memory of her time missing. The doctor said trauma-induced amnesia is common in cases like hers. She sent me a thank you card with a photo of her graduation from nursing school. She looks exactly like the thing that tried to kill me in those woods. But her eyes are different. Human eyes, full of life and hope and dreams. The witch's eyes had been empty, hungry, ancient. I keep that photo on my desk as a reminder, not just of the life I saved, but of how close I came to letting something truly evil win. How 2 hours made the difference between salvation and damnation. Sometimes I wonder if there are other Connor Walshes out there, rangers new to forests with their own dark legends. I've started keeping a list of national parks with unusual disappearance rates cross-referenced with local folklore. The list is longer than I'd like it to be. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Sarah Williams during those missing 16 hours. I read every single one. My name is Blake Anderson, and I should have forgotten Megan Foster's case. But something brought me back to that cursed forest. It had been 4 months since the 19-year-old college student vanished from the Whispering Pines Trail in Blackwood National Forest. 4 months since the official search was called off. 4 months since I filed that final report with the bitter taste of failure coating my tongue like copper pennies. But here I was at 5:23 a.m. on October 31st, 2019, driving my Ford Ranger down the fog-shrouded access road, my Garmin GPS showing coordinates 47 degree 12, 33.2 and 121 degrees 07 to 28.1 W. The thing about being a haunted ranger is that the forest never lets you forget. Not completely. I'd learned that lesson 3 years ago when I encountered something in the old growth section that the brass still won't let me put in an official report. Something that left me with a tremor in my left hand and the ability to sense when the natural order goes wrong. Today, that wrongness was singing in my bones like a tuning fork struck against reality itself. My Motorola APX radio crackled to life. Ranger 47, this is base. You're off duty today, Anderson. What's your location? I keyed the mic with fingers that smelled of black coffee and the lingering scent of my daughter Emma's strawberry shampoo from her goodbye hug. Base, this is 47. I'm following up on some evidence in the Foster case. Personal time. Copy that, 47. Be advised we've had 3 separate reports of missing hikers in your sector over the past 2 weeks. Local PD is investigating possible connection to homeless encampments. Missing hikers. My Garmin showed my heart rate spiking to 89 BPM as I remembered the Foster family's desperate phone calls, Mrs. Foster's voice cracking as she begged me not to give up. She's all we have, Ranger Anderson. Megan is our whole world. The access road ended at the Whispering Pines trailhead. I parked next to the weathered wooden sign that read, Elevation 2,847 feet, trail difficulty, moderate. My duty belt held everything regulation required. Sig Sauer P320, OC spray, tactical flashlight, first aid kit, and emergency GPS beacon. But I also carried what regulation didn't account for. A small vial of blessed salt Father Martinez had given me after my last supernatural encounter, and a photo of my family tucked behind my badge. The October air bit at my lungs as I shouldered my 35-pound pack. Temperature was 38 degrees Fahrenheit with 89% humidity, according to my weather radio. Perfect conditions for the kind of morning where reality gets thin around the edges. I'd walked this trail 17 times during the initial search for Megan Foster. GPS coordinates led me 1.2 miles northeast to her last known position, a granite outcropping where her iPhone had pinged the cell tower for the final time at 3:47 p.m. on June 15th. What we never found was any trace of where she went after that ping. But 3 days ago, something changed. A backpacker had found her Columbia hiking boot wedged under a fallen Douglas fir, 2 miles deeper into the forest than we'd ever searched. The boot that launched 1,000 nightmares and dragged me back into this green hell. The trail crunched under my Danner Tachyon boots as I passed the 0.5-mile marker. Each step sent a familiar rhythm through my bones. Crunch, squish through decomposing pine needles and October's early frost. But there was something else, a wrongness in the forest soundtrack. No bird song. Not a single goddamn chirp. My left hand started its familiar tremor as I checked my phone. 6:47 a.m. Full signal strength. Battery at 87%. I'd texted my wife Sarah before leaving. Working the Foster case today, home by dinner. Love you and Emma more than all the stars. The granite outcropping came into view through the Douglas fir canopy. Elevation 3,100 feet. GPS coordinates confirmed. 47 degree 1312.8, N 121 degree 06 and 45.3 W. This was Megan's last known position. I'd stood here so many times that the rock formation was burned into my memory like a scar. But today was different. Today there were children's voices, faint, distant, carried on a wind that made the hair on my neck stand up like iron filings near a magnet. Help us, and please, and we're so cold. I keyed my radio. Base, this is Ranger 47. I'm at the Foster LKP, requesting backup for possible missing children. Over. Static. Pure, crackling static that sounded like screaming if you listened too carefully. Base, do you copy? My heart hammered at 112 BPM as I checked my radio. Full battery. Clear frequency. But something was wrong with the electromagnetic spectrum itself. The children's voices grew clearer. Multiple voices. Young. Frightened. Please, mister. We've been lost so long. Can you help us find our families? Every instinct screamed danger. 3 years ago, I would have followed those voices immediately. Any ranger would. Children in distress override every other protocol. But 3 years ago, I hadn't encountered the thing in the old growth section that taught me some voices aren't meant to be followed. My tactical flashlight cut through the morning gloom as I moved off trail toward the sound. The beam illuminated frost-covered ferns and spiderwebs heavy with dew. But something was off about the light itself. It seemed to bend around certain areas, creating pockets of absolute darkness that my LED beam couldn't penetrate. We're here. Please don't leave us. 50 yards off trail, I found them. 5 children stood in a small clearing, ages ranging from maybe 6 to 12, pale, dirty, wearing clothes from different eras. One boy in what looked like 1980s corduroys, a girl in a 1960s flower print dress, another in modern jeans and a Pokemon t-shirt. Their eyes were the worst part, not the eyes of living children. Eyes like still pools of black water that reflected nothing. Oh, thank God, the oldest girl said, her voice carrying the wrong resonance like an echo in reverse. We've been waiting so long for someone to find us. Every cell in my body screamed run. But these were children. Lost, frightened children who needed help. The same voice that had driven me to become a ranger. The same instinct that made me promise Megan Foster's mother I wouldn't give up. Demanded I protect them. It's okay, I said, my voice steady, despite the cosmic wrongness radiating from their presence. I'm Ranger Anderson. I'm here to help. How long have you been lost? The Pokemon girl tilted her head at an angle that would break a living neck. Time is different here, Ranger Anderson. Some of us have been waiting since the old church burned down, some since the new millennium, some since last week. My Garmin showed an impossible reading. According to GPS, I was standing at coordinates 0 degrees 0000, 0 and 0 degrees 00 and 000. W, a mathematical impossibility that placed me at the intersection of the equator and prime meridian, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. "We know why you're really here," the boy in corduroys said, his voice harmonizing with frequencies that made my teeth ache. "You're looking for Megan Foster. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Blake Anderson's situation? Comment below." My hand instinctively moved to my service weapon, but some deeper understanding stopped me. These weren't children. These were something else. Something that wore the faces of lost innocence like masks. Something that had been collecting the disappeared for decades. "Where is she?" I managed to ask through a throat that tasted of copper and ozone. The children smiled in perfect unison, revealing teeth like broken glass. "She's with the shepherd now, in the place between spaces, where the old ways are kept alive. Where children who disappear become seeds for something much larger than your small human understanding can grasp." The forest around us began to shift. Trees that had stood for centuries suddenly showed different bark patterns, different branch formations. The very geology beneath my feet felt unstable, as if reality was editing itself in real time. My radio released a sound that wasn't static. It was screaming in frequencies human ears shouldn't be able to process. "The shepherd has been harvesting for so very long," the flower dress girl continued, her voice now harmonizing with cosmic frequencies that made my vision blur. "Your species thinks it understands predator and prey, but you're not even aware of your position in the actual food chain. You're livestock, spiritual livestock. And children like Megan, children with strong life force and pure souls, they make the best offerings to things that existed before your sun ignited." I tried to key my radio again, but my hand passed through it like it was made of smoke. Looking down, I realized I couldn't see my feet. The ground had become transparent, revealing layers of reality beneath reality. Far below, I could see vast spaces filled with collected souls, thousands upon thousands of missing persons from across decades, all floating in a space that existed perpendicular to normal existence. And there, suspended in that impossible void, I saw her, Megan Foster, still 19, still wearing her hiking gear. But her eyes held the knowledge of cosmic truths that no human mind was meant to contain. "The beautiful thing about your species," the Pokemon girl said, her childish voice now reverberating with the weight of geological time, "is how you never quite grasp the scale of the universe. You think your little forest is just trees and animals. You think missing persons are just local tragedies. You never realize that everything you call reality is just the surface tension on an ocean of hungry infinities." My left hand wasn't just trembling now. It was phasing in and out of existence. The blessed salt in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric, but when I reached for it, my hand passed through empty space. "But you're different, Blake Anderson," the oldest girl said. And now I could see that her face was shifting, cycling through the features of every missing child from the past 50 years. "You've touched the edges before. You've seen behind the curtain. That's why the shepherd chose you to witness this revelation. You're going to understand, and then you're going to choose." The clearing expanded impossibly, revealing structures that hurt to look at directly, geometric forms that existed in too many dimensions, casting shadows that moved independently of any light source. And standing among these impossible architectures was something my mind kept trying to interpret as a man in ranger clothing. But every time I focused on it directly, the figure revealed itself as something far older and larger, something that had been wearing human shapes since before humans existed. The missing persons you've spent your career searching for? The thing that wasn't a man said in a voice like grinding continental plates. They were never lost. They were selected. Chosen to feed something your civilization will never be equipped to understand. What you call disappearances are actually successful harvests in a cosmic agriculture project that has been running since your species first developed consciousness. My radio crackled back to life, but instead of dispatcher voices, it was broadcasting the sounds of every missing person from the past century, all of them calling for help simultaneously, all of them realizing too late that their disappearances were never random accidents. Megan Foster was special, the shepherd continued, its form cycling through every ranger who had ever died in service, every outdoorsman who had vanished without a trace. Her life force contained specific resonances we needed for the next phase of collection. She's not dead, Blake. Death is a human concept. She's been transformed into something more useful. A lure, a beacon, just like these children you see before you. I looked again at the 5 impossible children, and now I could see their true nature. They weren't the spirits of missing kids. They were psychic constructs designed to mimic human empathy responses. Cosmic fishing lures crafted from the distilled essence of every parental nightmare, every search and rescue operation that ended in failure. Your turn to choose, Ranger Anderson, the shepherd said, and I could feel its attention like solar radiation against exposed skin. You can join our collection willingly, become another lure to help us harvest more efficiently, or you can resist and discover how insignificant human will truly is against forces that shaped galaxies before your planet existed. But there was something the shepherd hadn't accounted for, something these cosmic entities, for all their vast intelligence, couldn't quite grasp about human nature. Love. Not the abstract concept of love, but the specific cellular level love I felt for my daughter Emma's laugh on Saturday mornings. The love that made me promise Sarah I'd always come home. The love that made me tell Megan Foster's mother I wouldn't give up, even when giving up was the only rational choice. I thought about Emma's drawing on my refrigerator, a stick figure ranger with "World's Best Daddy" written in purple crayon. I thought about Sarah's coffee breath when she kissed me goodbye. I thought about every family I'd reunited, every lost hiker I'd guided home, every time I'd been the difference between hope and despair. The blessed salt in my pocket suddenly blazed with heat so intense it felt like holding a star. My radio burst back into full clarity. Ranger 47, this is base. We've got your position. Backup is en route. Hold your location. The impossible children began to flicker like a bad TV signal. The shepherd's form started to lose cohesion. The cosmic architecture around us began folding in on itself. You cannot resist us, the entity said, but its voice was losing that omnipotent resonance. We are inevitable, You're nothing, I said, and meant it. You're cosmic scavengers feeding on despair. But I've got something you can't touch, something you can't harvest or transform or use as bait. I pulled out the photo from behind my badge. Emma and Sarah at the beach last summer, both of them squinting against the sun and laughing at some joke I'd just told. The image blazed with a light that made the cosmic entities recoil. You exist because people give up, I continued, feeling strength flow back into my limbs. Because people accept that some mysteries can't be solved. But I'm not giving up on Megan Foster. I'm not accepting that missing persons are just inevitable harvests for your cosmic agriculture project. The false children were screaming now, their childish voices revealing the true sounds underneath. Frequencies like the death of stars, like the heat death of universes. But those sounds were growing fainter. The shepherd made one final attempt, growing to a size that blocked out the sky, revealing its true form as something that had been harvesting conscious species across galaxies for eons. You delay the inevitable, little ranger. We will have her. We will have all of them. Your love is a spark against the infinite void. Maybe, I said, walking forward despite every instinct screaming at me to run. But that spark has kindled bigger fires. And sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept that someone they care about is gone forever. I stepped directly toward the cosmic entity, holding my family photo like a shield. The blessed salt in my pocket was burning through fabric and skin now. But the pain was clean, human, real. Reality snapped back like a rubber band. I was standing alone in the clearing at coordinates 47°13, 12.8, N 121 degrees 06 45.3, W elevation 3,100 feet. The morning sun was breaking through the Douglas fir canopy and I could hear birds singing. Normal birds. Living birds. My radio crackled with normal static. Ranger 47, this is base. Status report. Base, this is 47. I'm okay, but I need you to coordinate with FBI missing persons. I've got new information on the Foster case. And base? Go ahead, 47. Get me everything we have on missing children reports in this area going back to 1960. Cross-reference with reports of helpful children leading hikers off established trails. Copy that, 47. Backup is still en route. As I waited for support, I walked the perimeter of the clearing. No sign of the impossible children. No cosmic architecture. But there, pressed into the soft earth near a fallen log, I found something that made my heart stop. Fresh footprints. Adult size 7 hiking boots. Megan Foster's size. Leading deeper into the forest. The cosmic entities were right about one thing. This was bigger than any normal case. But they were wrong about human insignificance. Sometimes the universe's vast indifference could be defeated by someone who simply refused to stop caring. I keyed my radio one more time. Base, this is Ranger 47. I'm going off trail in pursuit of evidence. GPS coordinates to follow. And base, contact my wife. Tell her I'm bringing someone's daughter home. The footprints led toward the old growth section of the forest, where 3 years ago I'd encountered something that taught me the difference between natural and supernatural. Where I'd learned that some hungers are older than worlds, and some missing persons cases are battles for souls. But I'd also learned something else that day. Something the cosmic entities couldn't understand in their vast, cold intelligence. Love doesn't calculate odds. Love doesn't accept statistical inevitabilities. Love just keeps looking, keeps fighting, keeps refusing to give up, even when the universe itself says someone is gone forever. I followed the footprints into the deeper woods, where the real search for Megan Foster was about to begin. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Megan Foster. I read every single one. My name is Ryan Kowalski, and I should have forgotten Ashley Nicole Parker's case, but something brought me back to that cursed forest. 3 months had passed since the 22-year-old graduate student vanished without a trace from the Blackwater Creek Trail in Olympic National Forest. And everyone, my supervisor, the FBI, even her devastated parents, had moved on to calling it a presumed death. But that goddamn feeling in my gut wouldn't let it rest. I'd been a ranger for 8 years, and my intuition had never steered me wrong before. That sick electric sensation that crawled up my spine whenever something wasn't right in these woods. It had saved my ass more times than I could count. And Ashley's case? That feeling had been clawing at me like a rabid animal since day one. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on October 31st, 2019 from Detective Martinez in Port Angeles. Kowalski, we got a hiker who found something on the old Timber Creek Trail. Says it looks like Ashley Parker's North Face jacket, but here's the fucked up part. It's hanging from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground and there's fresh blood on it. The metallic taste of fear flooded my mouth as I grabbed my keys, knowing I was about to walk into hell. My wife Sarah was already asleep. Our 2-year-old daughter Emma curled up between us like she did when she had nightmares. I kissed both their foreheads, breathing in that sweet scent of Johnson's baby shampoo and Sarah's lavender lotion, memorizing it like a prayer. "Back by morning, baby," I whispered, though something deep in my bones told me that was a lie. The drive to the trailhead took 43 minutes through twisting mountain roads. My 2017 Ford Ranger's headlights, cutting through fog so thick it felt supernatural. The radio crackled with static, weird for this area, and my cell phone showed 2 bars, then 1, then nothing. My hands were already trembling on the steering wheel, that familiar sixth sense dread building like pressure behind my eyes. Detective Martinez met me at the trail marker, his face pale in the flashlight beam. "Ryan, this shit ain't normal. The jacket's been there 3 months according to the hiker, but the blood? It's still wet. still dripping. He handed me Ashley's student ID, found in the jacket pocket, the photo showing her bright smile and auburn hair. The plastic was warm to the touch, which made my stomach lurch. The timber trail stretched into darkness ahead, ancient Douglas firs looming like cathedral pillars. My Streamlight tactical flashlight cut through the black, but shadows seemed to move independently of its beam. That crawling sensation on my neck intensified as we approached the GPS coordinates Martinez had been given. 47 degree 58, 12 N, 123 degree 43, 07 W. There, Martinez pointed upward with a shaking hand. Ashley's bright blue North Face jacket hung from a massive cedar branch, swaying in windless air. Dark droplets fell steadily from the sleeve, hitting the forest floor with tiny splashes that sounded like whispers. But it was what I saw with my peripheral vision that made my blood freeze. Shadowy figures moving between the trees, too tall and thin to be human. "You see that?" I whispered, my service pistol already in my hand. Martinez followed my gaze and went white as paper. "Jesus Christ, Ryan, what the fuck are those things?" The figures melted back into the darkness, but I could feel their eyes on us, hungry and patient. We approached the tree slowly, boots crunching on pine needles and fallen leaves. The jacket was definitely Ashley's. I remembered it from the missing person photos, remembered her mother clutching an identical one at the press conference, sobbing into the fabric. But up close, the blood wasn't just dripping from the sleeves. It was seeping from inside the jacket as if something was bleeding within the fabric itself. "Martinez, call for backup," I ordered. But when I turned around, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just vanished like he'd never existed. My radio crackled with static, then a voice that made my skin crawl. "Ryan Kowalski, we've been waiting for you to return." The voice was Ashley's, but wrong somehow, distorted like it was coming from underwater. I spun in a circle, flashlight beam dancing frantically between the trees. Ashley, where are you?" My voice echoed back strangely, multiplied into a chorus of responses that seemed to come from every direction at once. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds, my breath forming clouds that hung motionless in the still air. That's when I saw the first symbol carved into the cedar tree's bark. A pentagram surrounded by text in what looked like Latin, the cuts fresh and weeping sap like blood. Below it, nailed to the trunk with railroad spikes, was a Polaroid photo that made my knees buckle. Ashley Nicole Parker, alive but terrified, bound to what appeared to be a stone altar, figures in dark robes surrounding her. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Ryan's situation? Comment below. The photo was dated October 31st, 2019, tonight, which meant she was still alive, somewhere in these woods, and whatever had taken her was using her as bait to draw me deeper into their territory. My hands shook as I studied the image, trying to identify landmarks or anything that might indicate location. Behind Ashley in the photo, I could make out cave walls covered in similar carved symbols, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows. But it was the faces of the robed figures that made my stomach turn. Pale, gaunt features that looked more skull than flesh, eyes that reflected the camera flash like an animal's. A branch snapped behind me. I whirled around to find a man stepping out from behind a massive Douglas fir, wearing modern hiking clothes but moving with predatory grace. "Ranger Kowalski," he said in a cultured voice that somehow carried an accent I couldn't place. "My name is Brother Matthias. We've been expecting you for quite some time." "Where is Ashley?" I demanded, keeping my pistol trained on his center mass. But more figures emerged from the darkness, 6, 8, 12 of them, forming a loose circle around me. They looked normal at first glance, like any group of hikers, but their eyes held that same flat, reflective quality I'd seen in the photo. Brother Matthias smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed to points. "Ashley Nicole Parker serves a greater purpose now, as will you. The sect of the Crimson Dawn was never truly destroyed, Ranger. We simply learned to hide better. to blend in with the hikers and campers and weekend warriors who trespass in our sacred places. I backed against the cedar tree, feeling the rough bark scrape through my uniform shirt. The FBI said you were all dead or in prison. That mass suicide in 1987? A performance, he laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally through the forest. We needed the world to believe we were gone so we could continue our work in peace. For 32 years, we've been gathering strength, collecting subjects for the great opening. Ashley was supposed to be our final sacrifice, but then we realized we needed something more. We needed someone with the sight. The sight. That's what my grandmother used to call it, back when I was a kid in Michigan. The ability to sense things that others couldn't, to feel the supernatural pressing against the boundaries of the normal world. I'd always thought it was just good instincts, ranger training, nothing more. You've been watching me, I realized with growing horror. The cases where I found missing hikers that everyone else said were impossible to locate. The times I knew exactly where to search when logic said they should be somewhere else. Brother Matthias nodded approvingly. Ryan Kowalski, the ranger who never loses anyone. The man who can sense death from miles away, who walks into danger because he knows, somehow, he always knows, where to find the lost. You have a gift, and gifts must be harvested. The circle of cultists tightened around me. Up close I could see the surgical scars on their faces, the places where their features had been altered. Some had extra eyes grafted onto their cheekbones. Others had mouths that stretched too wide, sewn with thick black thread. One woman had arms that bent in too many places, as if additional joints had been added to her bones. Ashley's sacrifice was interrupted when she managed to escape 3 months ago. Brother Matthias continued conversationally. She made it all the way to Blackwater Creek before we recaptured her. But the ritual requires a willing vessel, you see, and her spirit proved resistant to our ministrations. A scream echoed through the forest, high, desperate, and definitely human. Ashley's voice calling my name through the darkness. The sound came from deeper in the woods, somewhere uphill toward the old mining country where the maps showed cave systems and abandoned tunnels. "She's calling for you, Ranger," one of the cultists whispered, her voice a wet rasp that sounded like she had no tongue. "She knows you're here. She knows you came back for her. Will you abandon her again?" The guilt hit like a physical blow. 3 months ago, I'd led the initial search for Ashley. We'd covered hundreds of square miles, used helicopters and tracking dogs, spent weeks combing every inch of forest. But my intuition, that goddamn sight, had kept pulling me toward a different area, a section of wilderness marked as dangerous on all the maps. I'd ignored it, followed protocol instead, and Ashley had remained lost. "The mining caves," I said, pieces clicking together in my head. "You're keeping her in the old tungsten mines up near Deer Ridge." Brother Matthias's smile widened impossibly, the corners of his mouth nearly reaching his ears. "Oh, Ranger, you really do have the sight, don't you? Yes, the mines provide excellent acoustics for ritual work. The screams echo for miles underground." I broke from the circle, sprinting uphill toward the mining road. Behind me, the cultists gave chase, but they moved wrong, too fluid, like their bones had been replaced with something more flexible. I could hear them flowing through the underbrush, keeping pace but not overtaking, herding me toward their destination. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran, illuminating glimpses of horror between the trees, symbols carved into bark, animal bones arranged in geometric patterns, photographs of missing hikers nailed to branches like grotesque decorations. How many people had vanished in these woods over the years? How many had been attributed to exposure, falls, or simple bad luck? The old mining road appeared ahead, gravel crunching under my boots as I turned uphill. My lungs burned in the thin air, my uniform soaked with sweat despite the October cold. Ashley's screams grew louder, more desperate, echoing from the cave entrance that yawned like a mouth in the mountainside. I paused at the mine entrance, checking my gear with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Service pistol with 17 rounds of .40 caliber, backup magazine, tactical flashlight with 4 hours of battery life, radio that was picking up nothing but static, cell phone with no signal, no backup coming, no cavalry riding to the rescue. The mine shaft stretched into absolute darkness, supported by rotting timber that looked older than God. The air that flowed from the depths carried scents that made my gorge rise, decay, copper pennies, and something else. Something that smelled like burned hair and sulfur. Ryan. Ashley's voice echoed from the depths, weaker now, but definitely her. Please. They're going to... Oh God, they're coming back. I entered the mine, flashlight beam revealing narrow-gauge railroad tracks that disappeared into the black. The walls were carved from solid rock, but symbols had been etched into every available surface. Not just pentagrams, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to shift and writhe in my peripheral vision. 20 yards in, I found the first body. The hiker had been dead for months, but his corpse was arranged in a seated position against the mine wall, hands folded peacefully in his lap. What remained of his face was locked in an expression of absolute terror, mouth open in a perpetual scream. His chest cavity had been opened with surgical precision, ribs spread wide like the wings of some grotesque bird. Inside his chest, something that definitely wasn't human anatomy pulsed with its own bioluminescent glow. I fought down vomit and kept moving deeper. More bodies lined the tunnel. Hikers, campers, missing persons from across the Pacific Northwest. All arranged in that same seated position, all bearing evidence of careful surgical modification. Some had additional limbs grafted to their torsos. Others had been fitted with animal parts, wolf heads, deer antlers, bird wings stretched wide. The mine forked ahead, tracks splitting left and right. Ashley's screams came from the left passage, but my sight was pulling me hard to the right, where a different kind of horror waited. I chose Ashley, following her voice deeper into the earth. The passage opened into a vast, underground chamber, clearly natural rather than man-made. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like teeth, and the floor had been carved into concentric circles, surrounding a stone altar that gleamed wetly in the light of burning torches. Ashley Nicole Parker was bound to that altar, naked and painted with symbols in what looked like her own blood. She was conscious, turning her head toward my flashlight beam with eyes wide with desperate hope. But it was what surrounded her that made my finger tighten on the pistol trigger. Dozens of cultists filled the chamber, all wearing those same dark robes I'd seen in the photograph. But up close, I could see that the robes weren't fabric. They were made from human skin, sewn together with sinew, decorated with preserved organs that still twitched with residual nerve impulses. At the center of it all stood Brother Matthias, but he looked different now, taller, more angular, as if his bones had been stretched on some medieval rack. His face had been split vertically down the middle, creating two mouths that spoke in harmony. "Welcome to the ceremony, Ranger Kowalski," both mouths said in unison. "You arrived just in time for the final invocation." I raised my pistol, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely aim. "Let her go. I'm taking her out of here." "Oh, but you misunderstand," Brother Matthias laughed, the sound bouncing off cave walls like breaking glass. "Ashley isn't the sacrifice anymore. You are." The cultists began to chant in a language that predated human speech, words that seemed to reach inside my skull and rearrange my thoughts. The temperature plummeted until I could see my breath, and the shadows cast by the torches began moving independently of their flames. Something was coming through those shadows, something vast and ancient that had been waiting in the spaces between worlds for an invitation to enter ours. The stone altar began to crack, green light spilling from the fissures. Ashley's screams took on a different quality, as if her voice was being joined by others, by all the victims who had died in this place. That's when I understood. The sect of the Crimson Dawn wasn't trying to summon something. They were trying to create a doorway, a permanent opening between dimensions, and they needed someone with the sight to anchor it in our reality. I started shooting. The first bullet took Brother Matthias center mass, spinning him around but not dropping him. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, hissing where it hit the stone floor. The second and third shots dropped two cultists, their skin robes dissolving into ash as they fell. But for every cultist I killed, two more seemed to emerge from the shadows. They moved like spiders, scuttling across the walls and ceiling with impossible agility. Their faces had changed completely now, becoming something arthropod with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked with hunger. I fought my way toward the altar, brass casings ringing off stone as I emptied my magazine. Ashley was screaming my name, pulling against her bonds with strength born of desperation. Behind her, that green light was growing brighter, and things that might once have been human were starting to emerge from the cracks. My pistol clicked empty just as I reached the altar. I fumbled for my backup magazine, but cultist claws raked across my back, shredding my uniform and the flesh beneath. Blood ran hot down my spine as I slammed the fresh magazine home, turned, and put 3 rounds into something that might once have been human, but now looked like a praying mantis made of stretched skin and exposed bone. "Ryan, the ropes," Ashley gasped. "Cut the ropes!" I pulled my utility knife, sawing frantically at the hemp bindings while using my body to shield her from the circling cultists. The blade was sharp, but the ropes were thick, and my hands were slippery with blood from dozens of cuts. That's when Brother Matthias rose from where he'd fallen. His torso split open like a flower, revealing organs that pulsed with that same green light. "You cannot stop what has already begun," he said, voice multiplying until it sounded like a choir of the damned. "The great opening requires only one more death, and we have you both here so conveniently." The first rope parted. Ashley sat up, rubbing circulation back into her wrists, her eyes fixed on something behind me. "Ryan," she whispered. "Oh God, Ryan, look." I turned to see my worst nightmare made flesh. The thing emerging from the crack in the altar was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with too many arms and a head that seemed to be composed entirely of mouths. It moved with liquid grace, each step dissolving the stone beneath its feet. This was what the sect had been trying to summon, not just a demon, but something that existed outside the natural order entirely. The sight, it spoke directly into my mind, voice like breaking glass and screaming wind. "Give us the sight, and your death will be swift." But Ashley was free now, and my grandmother's words from 30 years ago suddenly came flooding back. "The sight ain't just for seeing, boy. It's for fighting back against things that shouldn't exist." I'd never tried to use whatever ability I had as a weapon, had always thought of it as purely passive. But with Ashley's life on the line and that thing reaching for us with claws that dripped reality-warping venom, I let that cold, electric sensation in my spine build until it felt like lightning. Then I pushed. The feedback hit the creature like a physical blow, sending it staggering backward. Its form flickered, becoming translucent, and the green light dimmed noticeably. For just a moment, I saw through its disguise to what it really was. Something wounded, something that had been trapped between dimensions for eons, desperate to escape into our world. "The altar," Ashley shouted, somehow understanding what I'd realized. "It's not a summoning platform, it's a prison. They've been trying to break it." Brother Matthias let out a shriek of rage that shattered stalactites overhead. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. The barriers between worlds are weakening. This creature offers salvation from what's coming." But I wasn't listening anymore. I emptied my second magazine into the crack in the altar, each bullet strike causing the green light to flicker and dim. The creature writhed in what might have been pain or might have been fury, its form becoming more and more transparent. Ashley found a torch and began setting fire to the skin robes scattered around the chamber. The flames spread with unnatural speed, consuming not just the fabric, but the symbols carved into the walls. Whatever power had been building in this place was breaking down, unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread. The surviving cultists fled deeper into the mines, their inhuman shrieks echoing through stone passages. Brother Matthias made one last desperate lunge for me, but Ashley swung the burning torch like a baseball bat, connecting with his distorted skull in a spray of sparks and black ichor. He collapsed, his body already beginning to decompose with supernatural speed. Within seconds, nothing remained but ash and the lingering smell of sulfur. The creature gave one final scream of rage and frustration before disappearing entirely, sucked back through the crack that was now rapidly sealing itself. The green light faded to nothing, leaving us alone in a chamber lit only by dying flames. "Ryan," Ashley said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and trauma. "How did you find me?" I helped her to her feet, offering her my uniform shirt to cover herself. "Same way I find everyone," I said, though I was still trying to process what had just happened. I followed the feeling. We made our way out of the mine together, supporting each other when the adrenaline crash hit and our legs turned to rubber. Dawn was breaking over the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that looked impossibly beautiful after the horror we'd just escaped. My radio crackled back to life as we reached the surface. "Unit 47, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" "Dispatch, this is Kowalski," I managed, my voice hoarse from breathing smoke and terror. "I've got Ashley Nicole Parker. She's alive. Send paramedics to the old tungsten mine access road." "Copy that, Unit 47. Paramedics are en route. Good work, Ranger." But as we waited for help to arrive, Ashley grabbed my arm with trembling fingers. "Ryan, this isn't over. Brother Matthias said the barriers between worlds are weakening. What if there are other cults? Other rituals?" I looked back at the mine entrance, already feeling that familiar cold sensation building at the base of my skull. Somewhere in the darkness below, I could sense movement, whispers, things that hadn't been destroyed but merely delayed. "Then I guess I better start learning how to use this site for more than just finding missing people," I said, pulling Ashley closer as sirens wailed in the distance. Because deep down I knew she was right. This was just the beginning. The real war against the darkness was about to start, and whether I wanted it or not, I was going to be on the front lines. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Ashley Nicole Parker. I read every single one. My name is Wade Patterson, and at 6:47 a.m. my radio crackled with the call that would change my life. "Unit 12, we've got a code yellow, missing hiker, Olympic National Park, Ho River Trail vicinity. Female 23, name Rachel Foster. Family reports she's been missing since yesterday afternoon around 1600 hours." I set down my coffee mug, still had Sarah's lipstick mark from her goodbye kiss on the rim, and reached for my gear. The morning light filtering through our kitchen window caught Emma's crayon drawing taped to the fridge. Stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and me under a crooked sun. I'd promised to be home for her soccer practice at 4. "Copy that, dispatch. ETA 25 minutes to Trailhead," I responded, already mentally cataloging the search grid patterns I'd memorized during my forestry degree. My colleagues at the ranger station called me professor behind my back, not always kindly. But my methodical approach had found 3 missing hikers in the past 2 years when their gut instincts had failed. The drive to Olympic National Park took me through familiar terrain that felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. My 2008 Honda Civic's headlights cut through the October mist, clinging to the evergreens like something alive. The radio weather report crackled. Unseasonably cold front moving in, temperatures dropping to 34 degrees, possible precipitation. I parked at the Ho River Trailhead at 7:15 a.m., coordinates 47.8606 degrees N, 123.9348 degrees W, elevation 578 feet. My standard search pack weighed 32 pounds. First aid kit, emergency shelter, protein bars, water purification tablets, GPS unit, spare batteries for my Motorola radio, and the topographical maps I'd laminated myself. The other rangers teased me about my Boy Scout preparation, but preparation saved lives. Rachel Foster's Toyota Camry sat alone in the parking area, Washington plates QBX 4472, a thin layer of dew suggesting it had been there overnight. I photographed the vehicle, noting the University of Washington parking sticker and the hiking boots visible through the rear window. Good boots, Merrill Moabs, probably size 7. The car was locked, no signs of disturbance. My flip phone buzzed. Sarah's text: "Emma wants Daddy to find the lost girl and come home safe. Love you." I pocketed the phone and approached the trailhead information board. The Ho River Trail stretched 18 miles into the Olympic rainforest, ending at the base of Mount Olympus. Most day hikers turned back at the 5-mile mark. Rachel's emergency contact form, filled out at the ranger station the previous morning, indicated she planned a solo day hike, with plans to return by 6 p.m. The trail began typically enough. Well-maintained packed earth bordered by Douglas fir and western hemlock. The morning air smelled of decomposing leaves and that particular Pacific Northwest dampness that gets into your bones. But something felt off. In my 3 years patrolling these trails, I'd developed an instinct for the forest's rhythms. Today, the usual dawn chorus of wrens and thrushes was muted, almost hesitant. I keyed my radio. Unit 12 to dispatch, beginning search pattern at trail mile marker 0. We'll report every 30 minutes. Copy that, Wade. Weather's looking rough. How's your battery life? I checked my gear. Radio at full, GPS showing 4 bars, phone at 80%. I'm good for a full day if needed. But as I hiked deeper into the forest, my equipment began acting strangely. My GPS coordinates flickered between readings, sometimes showing I was 50 feet east of the trail when I stood directly on it. The radio crackled with bursts of static that sounded almost like whispers. My analytical mind cataloged these anomalies while trying to rationalize them. Solar flare activity, mineral deposits interfering with signals, old equipment finally failing. At mile marker 2, I found the first sign. Rachel's water bottle, a blue Nalgene with University of Washington stickers, sat upright on a fallen log 20 feet off the main trail. Not dropped, not abandoned, placed. The cap was screwed on tight, the bottle 3/4 full. No hiker leaves a water source behind intentionally, especially not positioned so deliberately. I documented the discovery with my digital camera, noting GPS coordinates 47.8744 degrees N, 123.9567 degrees W, elevation 723 feet. The surrounding area showed no obvious footprints in the soft earth, which made no sense. How had the bottle gotten there? My radio crackled. Unit 12, this is dispatch. We've got additional information from the family. Rachel Foster was researching local folklore for her anthropology thesis. Something about Native American legends in Olympic National Park. That phrase sent an unexpected chill down my spine. I'd read every historical document about this park during my training, including the classified incident reports from 1966 that most rangers never saw. There'd been a series of disappearances that October, 7 people vanishing without a trace over 3 weeks. The official report blamed unseasonable weather and inadequate trail markings, but the witness statements told a different story. Stories of voices calling from empty forest, of hikers found wandering miles from where they disappeared with no memory of the intervening time. And then there were the references to the Blackwood ceremony. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, can you get more specifics on that folklore research? What legends was she investigating? Static filled the channel for nearly 30 seconds before a response came. Unit 12, having trouble. Your signal, breaking up. My radio showed full bars, but the communication was degrading. I tried my flip phone. No service, which wasn't unusual in the deep forest, but the timing felt ominous. At mile marker 3, the trail split. The main path continued east toward the Ho River Suspension Bridge, while a smaller unmarked trail branched north into denser forest. According to my topographical maps, that northern path was an old logging road, abandoned in the 1960s and officially closed to public access. Rachel's footprints appeared in a muddy patch at the junction, size 7 boot treads matching the Merrills I'd seen in her car. The prints led north, off the main trail. Every protocol I'd learned said to call for backup before following an unmarked trail, but my radio was getting nothing but static, and the temperature was dropping fast. If Rachel was injured and exposed, every minute counted. I made a decision my wife would later call typical Wade. I followed the evidence, not the protocol. The abandoned logging road was barely recognizable as a trail, overgrown with salmonberry and devil's club that caught at my uniform. The canopy grew thicker, blocking most of the morning light and creating a premature twilight that made me check my watch repeatedly. 8:43 a.m. but it felt like dusk. After 20 minutes of hiking, I found the campsite. A small clearing opened ahead, maybe 30 feet across, ringed by ancient Douglas firs whose trunks were easily 8 feet in diameter. In the center sat the remains of a fire pit, constructed from river stones, with what looked like wooden posts arranged in a rough circle around it. The posts were weathered gray, carved with symbols that looked vaguely familiar from my Pacific Northwest history courses, but that I couldn't quite identify. And there, hanging from one of the posts, was Rachel's red fleece jacket. My heart rate spiked as I approached. The jacket was undamaged, not torn or bloodstained, but removed deliberately and hung carefully on the post like a flag. The morning air carried a smell I couldn't identify, something between burning wood and spoiled meat, but neither quite right. I photographed everything methodically, my academic training overriding the growing dread in my gut. The wooden posts were old, maybe decades old, but the carved symbols showed no weathering. The fire pit contained what looked like fresh ashes, though no smoke rose from them. When I knelt to examine them closer, the ashes were cold to the touch, cold enough that frost was forming on my fingertips. That's when I heard Rachel's voice calling my name. "Wade? Wade? I'm over here. I need help." The voice came from deeper in the forest, north of the clearing. It sounded exactly like the description her mother had given me. Soft, slightly hoarse from allergies, with that particular inflection pattern of someone raised in eastern Washington. But something in my gut clenched like a fist. I'd never told Rachel my name. Her emergency contact form listed her as hiking alone, and I'd introduced myself to her family by radio, not in person. There was no way she should know who I was. "Rachel?" I called back. "Rachel Foster? This is Wade Patterson with the National Park Service. Are you injured?" "Wade, thank God, I twisted my ankle. I can't make it back to the trail. Please, I'm so cold." The voice was coming from a dense grove of trees about 50 yards north of the clearing. I could see something red through the undergrowth, possibly her shirt or maybe more clothing. But my analytical mind was cataloging inconsistencies. If she'd twisted her ankle yesterday afternoon, why wasn't she hypothermic by now? The overnight temperature had dropped below freezing. Why did her voice sound so steady, so unafraid? And why did I feel like something was watching me from the carved posts? If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Wade Patterson's situation? Comment below. I approached the grove carefully, my hand moving instinctively to the bear spray on my belt. The red object became clearer as I got closer. Definitely fabric, possibly a shirt or hiking top. But the closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The temperature was dropping noticeably with each step, and my breath began misting despite the morning sun filtering through the canopy. "Rachel, keep talking so I can find you," I called. "I'm right here, Wade, just a little further." But the voice seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere, echoing strangely in the still air. And there was something else, an undertone I hadn't noticed before, like multiple voices speaking in unison but just slightly out of sync. I reached the grove and pushed through the undergrowth. The red fabric was there all right, but it wasn't clothing. It was a piece of red surveyor's tape, the kind used to mark boundaries or hazards, tied to a branch at exactly eye level. Fresh, recently placed. Someone was fucking with me. My radio crackled suddenly, clear as a bell. "Wade, this is Sarah. Emma's asking when Daddy's coming home." I grabbed the radio so fast I nearly dropped it. "Sarah, how are you on this channel? This is a Park Service frequency." Static. Then, impossibly, my 5-year-old daughter's voice. "Daddy, there's a scary lady at the door. She says she knows where the lost girl is." Every hair on my arm stood up. I tried my flip phone, still no service. I tried the radio again, nothing but static. But I had heard those voices, clear as my own heartbeat. Either my equipment was malfunctioning in ways that defied basic electronics, or something else was happening here. The rational part of my mind, the part that had earned me a forestry degree and 3 commendations for search and rescue work, insisted there had to be a logical explanation. Crossed radio signals maybe, or some kind of emergency broadcast test I wasn't aware of. But that didn't explain how whoever was broadcasting knew my wife's name, my daughter's voice, or that I was currently searching for a missing woman. I made another decision that would haunt me for years. I kept going. The surveyor's tape was one of 6 identical pieces, each tied to a different tree, creating a trail that led deeper into the forest. Each piece was positioned exactly at eye level for someone my height, 5, 10, as if placed specifically for me to follow. The spacing between them was regular, maybe 30 yards, maintaining visibility from one to the next even in the dense undergrowth. After following 4 markers, I realized I was walking in a large circle. I stopped and checked my GPS unit. According to the coordinates, I was moving in a perfect circle with a radius of approximately 200 meters, centered on the clearing with the wooden posts. But that was impossible. I'd been walking in what felt like a straight line following the red tape from tree to tree. I backtracked to the previous marker and checked my compass. The needle spun lazily, unable to find magnetic north. I tapped the face, thinking it might be stuck, but the needle continued its slow rotation like it was searching for something that wasn't there. That's when I noticed the silence. Olympic National Park is never truly quiet. Even in winter, there are sounds: wind through branches, the distant rush of the Hoh River, bird calls, the occasional rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. But standing there among the survey markers, I realized I couldn't hear anything beyond my own breathing and heartbeat. The forest had gone completely unnaturally silent. And then I heard the singing. It was faint at first, just at the edge of audibility, like a radio station not quite tuned in properly. Multiple voices, definitely human, singing something that might have been a hymn or might have been something older. The melody was unfamiliar but somehow recognizable, like a song you remember from childhood but can't quite place. I followed the sound back toward the clearing, moving as quietly as possible. My training in wildlife observation had taught me to minimize noise, heel-toe walking, avoiding loose branches, breathing slowly and evenly. But even with my careful movement, every step seemed to echo unnaturally in the stillness. The clearing came into view through the trees and I stopped short. 7 figures stood around the fire pit, arranged in a circle between the carved wooden posts. They wore what looked like simple brown robes, hoods drawn up so I couldn't see their faces. They were singing in a language I didn't recognize, something with too many consonants and vowel sounds that seemed to come from the back of the throat. And in the center of their circle, tied to a chair that definitely hadn't been there 20 minutes earlier, was Rachel Foster. She was alive, conscious, and looking directly at me through the trees. Her mouth was covered with what looked like duct tape, but her eyes were wide and alert, tracking my movement. She was wearing jeans and a white long-sleeved shirt, not the red fleece I'd found hanging on the post. Every instinct told me to radio for backup, but my radio had been useless for the past hour. My flip phone showed no service. I was alone, watching what appeared to be some kind of ritual or ceremony, with the missing person I'd been sent to find as the apparent centerpiece. I had to make a choice: retreat to get help, potentially leaving Rachel in the hands of these people for hours, or intervene immediately with no backup and no way to call for assistance. The singing stopped. All 7 figures turned to look directly at where I was hidden in the trees, though I hadn't moved or made any sound. Slowly, in unison, they raised their hands and pulled back their hoods. What I saw underneath made my rational, analytical mind simply stop working for several seconds. They all had the same face. Not similar faces, the exact same face. A woman, maybe 40 years old, with long dark hair and features that might have been pretty under different circumstances. But the eyes were wrong, completely black, no visible iris or sclera, just darkness that seemed to reflect light like water. And they were all smiling at me with identical expressions of patient amusement, like teachers waiting for a slow student to understand a simple concept. The woman in the center, or maybe they were all the center, I couldn't tell anymore, spoke in a voice I recognized. It was the voice that had called my name, claimed to be Rachel Foster asking for help. "Hello, Wade. We've been waiting for you." The other 6 figures spoke in unison. "We've been waiting since 1966. My legs nearly gave out. 1966, the year of the unexplained disappearances, the year of the incident reports that were still classified, the year someone or something had conducted what the scattered witness accounts called the Blackwood ceremony. I forced myself to focus on Rachel. She was maybe 30 feet away, visibly unharmed but clearly terrified. The rational part of my mind tried to process what I was seeing. Mass hallucination caused by gas leak, maybe, or some kind of coordinated hoax, or a psychological break brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. But then the woman in the center did something that destroyed my ability to rationalize what was happening. She began to change. Her face remained the same, but her body began to stretch and elongate, growing taller, while maintaining human proportions. Her arms extended until her fingertips nearly touched the ground. Her neck lengthened like a snake's, allowing her to lean forward over the fire pit while her feet remained planted in their original position. The other 6 figures began changing too, but differently. Some grew additional arms that sprouted from their sides like branches. Others split down the middle, becoming 2 identical figures sharing the same legs. One simply faded, becoming translucent until I could see the forest through her body. And all the while, they maintained those patient, amused smiles. "Wade," the elongated figure said, her voice now echoing as if coming from a great distance. "Do you know what happened here in 1966? I found my voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "People disappeared. People were chosen," she corrected. 7 people, over 3 weeks in October, just like now. They came looking for folklore, for stories, for truth about the old ceremonies. Just like Rachel. The mention of Rachel's name snapped me back to the immediate situation. Whatever this was, hallucination, hoax, or something worse, I had a job to do. I was here to find Rachel Foster and bring her home safely to her family. I stepped out of the trees and into the clearing. "Let her go," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm the one you want to talk to. I'm the ranger. She's just a college student doing research." The 7 figures, or however many there actually were because counting them had become strangely difficult, laughed in unison. The sound was like wind through dead leaves, or maybe like crying. "Oh, Wade," they said together. "You still don't understand. Rachel isn't the one being chosen this time." The elongated figure gestured toward me with one impossibly long arm. "You are." The temperature in the clearing dropped so suddenly that my breath began coming out in visible puffs. The fire pit, which had contained only cold ashes moments before, suddenly blazed with flames that gave off no heat. The carved wooden posts began to glow with a soft, sickly light that hurt to look at directly. And I realized that Rachel Foster wasn't tied to a chair in the center of the circle. She was tied to one of the wooden posts, and she wasn't Rachel Foster at all. The thing wearing Rachel's face looked at me with those same black, reflective eyes and smiled. "My name is Wade Patterson," it said in my own voice. And at 6:47 a.m., my radio crackled with the call that would change my life. I looked down at my hands. They were becoming translucent. I looked at my radio. The display showed a date I recognized, October 15th, 1966. I looked at the fire pit, and in the flames I could see 7 figures in Park Service uniforms, all standing in a circle, all holding hands, all singing in a language with too many consonants. And I finally understood what had happened to the missing hikers in 1966, and what was happening to me now. The entity that had been calling itself Rachel Foster stood up from the wooden post. She hadn't been tied to it, she had been part of it, and walked toward me with that patient, amused smile. "Every 42 years, she said in my voice, "we need a new anchor. Someone to keep us connected to your world, to keep us fed. The last anchor is getting tired." She gestured toward the fire pit, and I saw him clearly now, a man in a 1960s Park Service uniform, standing in the flames holding hands with 6 other figures I couldn't quite focus on. His face was slack, empty, like a puppet with no one controlling the strings. "Wade Patterson," she continued. "College-educated, methodical, curious about folklore and local legends. You're perfect. You'll do the job much better than poor Ranger Mitchell has been doing." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I watched in horror as my body became more translucent with each passing second, while my mind remained trapped inside, fully aware of what was happening. The thing wearing my voice began walking back toward the wooden post where the real Rachel Foster was tied. Had always been tied, I realized now. The other 6 figures? Or were there 7? Or 12? Counting them made my head hurt, began their singing again. But then something unexpected happened. My radio crackled clear and strong. Unit 12, this is dispatch. Wade, are you there? We've got additional units en route to your location. The singing stopped. The figures all turned toward my radio with expressions of surprise and what might have been fear. Unit 12, if you can hear this, help is coming. Just hold on. And then, impossibly, I heard my wife's voice over the radio. Wade, I love you. Emma loves you. Come home. The patient amusement vanished from the faces surrounding me. For the first time since this nightmare began, they looked uncertain. I felt something solid in my chest. Not hope exactly, but determination. I had a family. I had people who loved me and were waiting for me to come home. I had promised Emma I'd be at her soccer practice at 4 o'clock. I thought about that crayon drawing on the refrigerator. Daddy, Mommy, and me, under a crooked sun, and something inside me that had been growing cold suddenly blazed with warmth. I could move again. I lunged toward the wooden post where the real Rachel Foster was tied, my solid hands making contact with real rope, her real body warm and alive against mine as I pulled her away from the post. The 7 figures shrieked in unison, a sound like breaking glass and tearing metal. The fire pit exploded upward, sending impossible flames 30 feet into the air. The wooden posts began to crack and split, that sickly light flickering and dying. And suddenly I could hear helicopters. Real helicopters with real rotors beating real air, coming from the direction of the main trail. I could hear voices, human voices with the clipped cadence of search and rescue teams, calling my name and Rachel's name through bullhorns. The entity wearing my appearance looked at me with an expression of rage and frustration. "This isn't over," it said in my voice. "We know where you live. We know about Sarah. We know about Emma," but it was backing away from me, becoming less solid with each step. The other figures were fading too, like smoke dispersing in wind. "Every 42 years," it whispered as it disappeared. 2050, Wade Patterson. We'll be waiting." The clearing suddenly looked completely normal. Just trees and undergrowth and morning light filtering through the canopy. The wooden posts were gone. The fire pit was gone. The surveyor's tape had vanished. If not for Rachel Foster unconscious in my arms, I might have convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, but I knew I hadn't. The rescue team found us 20 minutes later, following the GPS coordinates from my radio signal. They said I'd been missing for 8 hours, though my watch showed only 2 hours had passed since I'd started following the unmarked trail. They said the abandoned logging road I'd been following didn't exist on any current maps, and the GPS coordinates I'd radioed in placed me in the middle of the Hoh River. Rachel recovered fully with no memory of her disappearance or the time in the clearing. Her official report stated she'd gotten lost on a side trail, spent the night in an emergency shelter, and was found suffering from mild exposure and dehydration. The doctors said her amnesia was consistent with hypothermia and trauma. I never filed my real report. Instead, I wrote a standard search and rescue summary that mentioned finding Rachel disoriented on an unmarked trail, probably suffering from hypothermia-induced confusion. I included no mention of the clearing, the wooden posts, the impossible figures, or the entity that wore my face and knew my name. But I kept the photographs. Every image I'd taken that morning showed exactly what I'd seen. The carefully placed water bottle, the red fleece hanging from a wooden post, the surveyor's tape, the clearing with its circle of carved posts. Physical evidence that something had happened, even if I couldn't prove what. I also kept the radio recordings. Our equipment automatically records all radio traffic during search and rescue operations, and when I reviewed the tapes later, I could hear everything. My conversations with dispatch, the strange voices claiming to be Sarah and Emma, and something else. In the background of every transmission from that morning, barely audible but definitely there, was the sound of singing in a language I didn't recognize. 3 weeks later, I requested a transfer to Mount Rainier National Park. I told my supervisor I wanted new challenges, opportunities for advancement, a chance to work in a more developed park system. I didn't tell him about the dreams that started the night after Rachel's rescue. Dreams where I stood in a circle of flames, holding hands with 6 other figures while something with my face and voice walked through a forest that looked suspiciously like the neighborhood where Sarah and Emma were sleeping. We moved to Ashford, Washington, in November 2008. Sarah was supportive as always, though she asked several times if something had happened during the foster search that I wasn't telling her about. I assured her everything was fine, that I just needed a change of scenery. Emma adapted to the move with the resilience of a 5-year-old, making new friends and starting kindergarten at Ashford Elementary. She still draws pictures of our family, but now they include a 4th figure she calls the Shadow Man. When I ask her about him, she says he's the man who watches our house sometimes, the one who looks like Daddy but isn't Daddy. I've learned to live with the knowledge that something is waiting for me in Olympic National Park, something that knows my name and my face and the sound of my voice, something that claimed it would return in 2050, when the cycle completes again. But I've also learned to live with the certainty that love, real, human love, has power against things that exist in the spaces between reality and nightmare. The voices of Sarah and Emma over that impossible radio connection didn't just save my life. They reminded me who I was and why I needed to come home. I still work as a forest ranger, but now I specialize in missing persons cases with unusual circumstances. Over the past 15 years, I've encountered 7 other situations that official reports can't adequately explain. Cases where the evidence suggests something beyond normal human experience, where people disappear in ways that defy logical explanation, where the forest itself seems to be actively participating in whatever is happening. And in every case, I've found that the key to survival isn't superior firepower or advanced technology, or detailed knowledge of the terrain. It's remembering who you are, and who's waiting for you to come home. In 2022, I received a letter forwarded through the Park Service from a graduate student at the University of Washington. She was researching local folklore for her anthropology thesis, specifically focusing on Native American legends in Olympic National Park. Her name was Jennifer Chen, and she was planning a solo hiking trip to gather primary source material for her research. She wanted to know if I could recommend any trails that might have historical significance, particularly areas where indigenous peoples might have conducted ceremonies or rituals. I wrote back immediately, recommending several well-maintained, heavily trafficked trails near the visitor center. I included detailed maps, emergency contact procedures, and a strongly worded suggestion that she never hike alone. I didn't mention the Ho River Trail, or the abandoned logging road that doesn't appear on any current maps, or the clearing with wooden posts that may or may not exist depending on who's looking for them. But I also started planning a return trip to Olympic National Park. Because it's 2025 now and 2050 is only 25 years away, and I have a terrible suspicion that the entity calling itself Rachel Foster wasn't entirely wrong about cycles and timing, and the need for new anchors. And because Jennifer Chen reminds me a lot of myself at 29, intelligent, analytical, curious about things that most people prefer to leave alone. I've been having the dreams again. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror, and comment your theory about what really happened to Rachel Foster in that clearing. Was she real? Was Wade? What's going to happen in 2050? I read every single one. The end. Based on true events that definitely didn't happen in Olympic National Park in October 2008, according to all official records that you shouldn't try to verify.